The mansion was silent, though the walls themselves seemed to whisper reminders of a life ticking away too quickly. Isabella Everhart, the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in the country, sat by the grand window in her room, staring at the manicured gardens below. She had always been surrounded by luxury, marble floors that gleamed, chandeliers that sparkled like captured stars, and servants who moved like shadows whenever she needed something. But none of that mattered now. She was 17 years old, and the doctors had given her only 3 months to live. A rare aggressive heart condition had silently been eroding her strength for years, and finally, the verdict was in. There was no cure, no miracle, no treatment that could extend her life beyond what little remained. Her father, Jonathan Everhart, had tried to protect her in every way possible. Money had built walls around her, doctors had monitored her constantly, and the best specialists had been flown in from around the globe. Yet none of it could stop the inevitability that weighed on every heartbeat. Isabella felt like a ghost in her own home, a fragile shell filled with the quiet terror of knowing she would soon vanish. She watched the gardens the way one watches a distant memory, longing for freedom yet trapped by the golden cage her father had built. It was in that heavy silence that a knock came at the door. Not a formal knock like the ones the butlers gave, precise and measured, but a soft, hesitant tap, almost apologetic. "Come in," Isabella called, her voice barely above a whisper. A young woman stepped in, carrying a basket of freshly laundered clothes. Her uniform was simple, almost humble, but her eyes held a quiet warmth that immediately caught Isabella's attention. This was the new maid, Emily, who had started just a week ago. No one had told Isabella much about her. She was from a small town, with no connections to the Everhart fortune, no experience in mansions like this, and yet there was something about her that felt real, something unpolished yet sincere. Emily approached cautiously, setting the basket on the corner of Isabella's bed. She smiled softly, sensing the tension in the air, and said, "I hope I'm not disturbing you, Miss Everhart." Isabella managed a weak smile, surprised at her own reaction. "No, you're not disturbing me," she replied, her voice fragile like glass. Emily nodded and lingered for a moment, as if she wanted to say more but wasn't sure what was appropriate. Finally she spoke almost to herself. "It must be so hard, living under all this pressure, knowing how little time you have." Isabella froze. No one had ever spoken so plainly about it. Not her doctors, not her father, not even her closest friends who tiptoed around her illness. Yet here was Emily, a stranger, acknowledging the unspoken truth. Something inside Isabella stirred, a mixture of surprise, relief, and a strange hope she hadn't felt in months. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt seen, not as a fragile patient, not as a billionaire's daughter, but as a person who was scared, lonely, and desperate for understanding. Over the next hour, Emily simply sat in the room, asking gentle questions about Isabella's favorite books, her memories of the places she had visited, and even small dreams she had once held for the future. Isabella shared more than she had with anyone in months, laughter and tears blending together as she recounted stories from her childhood, picnics in the sunlit gardens, quiet afternoons with her mother who had passed years ago, the thrill of sneaking into the library to read forbidden novels. Emily listened without judgment, without pity, and Isabella felt a strange lightness she hadn't felt since the day she received her diagnosis. Then, in a moment of quiet vulnerability, Isabella whispered, "Do you ever feel like life is just slipping through your fingers?" Emily paused, thoughtful. "Every day," she admitted softly, "but sometimes it's the smallest moments that remind us we're still alive. Have you ever had a moment so small yet so meaningful, it makes you forget everything else, even if only for a few minutes?" Isabella looked at her, curious. She realized this was a question not for her to answer in words, but to feel deep within her heart. And she realized the truth. She had never been asked to feel, only to endure. Emily's presence had already begun to change something inside her, and yet neither of them knew that the fragile threads of this new bond would soon lead to a revelation powerful enough to alter everything Isabella had been told about her fate. Something was coming, something neither fear nor wealth could have prepared her for. How would you feel if someone came into your life unexpectedly and made you see hope when you had almost given up? The days that followed brought a strange rhythm to Isabella's life. Emily had become a constant presence in the mansion, her quiet efficiency and unassuming kindness breaking the monotony of sterile routines and sorrow-filled silences. She didn't try to fix Isabella. She didn't offer hollow reassurances or pity. She simply listened, laughed when Isabella felt like laughing, and sometimes sat in silence, letting the room breathe with both their presences. It was a comfort Isabella had not realized she craved so desperately. One afternoon, as golden sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the Everhart library, Emily began cataloguing some old family records at Isabella's insistence. The Everharts prided themselves on preserving every document, every letter, and every photograph related to their lineage. Isabella had grown bored of these dusty shelves years ago, yet she found herself intrigued by Emily's curiosity. There was something almost childlike about the way she handled each old document, brushing off the dust with reverence, her eyes scanning lines of history like she could read the life hidden within them. "Why do you care so much about old letters?" Isabella asked, genuinely curious. Emily looked up, her expression thoughtful. "Because sometimes the past holds answers the present can't provide," she replied softly. "Sometimes people have been told lies about themselves for so long they forget the truth exists." Isabella tilted her head, a small spark of interest igniting. Emily's words were unusual, bold yet gentle, and they lingered in the air. That evening, Emily returned to her quarters, but she didn't sleep. Instead, she pored over family records she had discreetly found in the mansion archives, old medical files and letters that had been misfiled over decades. Something about the Everhart family history felt off. Emily's intuition, sharp from years of noticing patterns others missed, whispered that a secret had been buried intentionally. And if she was right, it might change everything about Isabella's prognosis. The next morning, Emily brought a small stack of documents to Isabella's room. "I found something," she said quietly, almost as if confessing a secret. Isabella's curiosity was piqued, and for the first time in months she felt a rush of adrenaline instead of the constant lethargy of illness. Emily spread the papers across Isabella's bed, revealing old medical records, letters from distant doctors, and even correspondences between Jonathan Everhart and a renowned cardiologist who had treated Isabella years ago. "Look at this," Emily whispered. "I think someone may have made a mistake, or worse. Something was hidden from you." Isabella leaned in, scanning the records with trembling hands. Her eyes widened as she read about a misdiagnosed condition, a treatment plan that had never been followed, and notes indicating that with the right therapy, her chances of survival were far higher than she had ever been told. A wave of disbelief washed over her. Could it be true? Could the life she thought was slipping away so quickly be extended, maybe even saved? Her mind raced. Questions flooded her, fears clashing with hope. Why would anyone lie to me? Why would my father, the doctors, everyone? Her voice trembled, tears brimming in her eyes. Emily reached out, placing a gentle hand over Isabella's. "Sometimes people lie out of fear," she said. "They think they're protecting you, but the truth is always better than living a lie. And now we can change your story if we act carefully." Isabella stared at Emily, realizing how much trust she had placed in this young maid in just a few short days. And yet, for the first time in her 17 years, she felt the fragile bud of hope bloom inside her heart. There was a chance, a real chance, to fight back against the narrative of death that had been imposed upon her. But uncovering the truth also came with danger. Emily had already sensed that the Everhart family might not be pleased to have decades-old secrets exposed. And just as Isabella's pulse began to quicken with anticipation, a question formed in her mind, a question that would shape the courage she needed for the days to come. The morning sun barely touched the Everhart mansion when Isabella awoke with a restless determination. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark that cut through the haze of fear and resignation. Emily had left the stack of documents on her bedside table overnight, and Isabella could no longer pretend that the truth was something distant or abstract. It was here, tangible and urgent, and she knew she had to act. She wasn't ready to die, not when a sliver of hope had appeared in the most unlikely of forms. Emily arrived promptly as usual, carrying a tray of tea and a small notebook. She noticed immediately the fire in Isabella's eyes, the way her posture had shifted from fragile resignation to quiet resolve. "I see you've been thinking," Emily said, setting the tray down carefully. Isabella nodded, barely trusting herself to speak at first. I can't let this go," she whispered. "We have to find out the truth, Emily. We need to know why this was hidden from me and if there's still a way to save my life." The morning sun barely touched the Everhart mansion when Isabella awoke with a restless determination. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark that cut through the haze of fear and resignation. Emily had left the stack of documents on her bedside table overnight, and Isabella could no longer pretend that the truth was something distant or abstract. It was here tangible and urgent, and she knew she had to act. She wasn't ready to die, not when a sliver of hope had appeared in the most unlikely of forms. Emily arrived promptly as usual, carrying a tray of tea and a small notebook. She noticed immediately the fire in Isabella's eyes, the way her posture had shifted from fragile resignation to quiet resolve. "I see you've been thinking," Emily said, setting the tray down carefully. Isabella nodded, barely trusting herself to speak at first. I can't let this go," she whispered. "We have to find out the truth, Emily. We need to know why this was hidden from me, and if there's still a way to save my life." Emily smiled, a mixture of pride and caution in her expression. "We'll take it step by step," she said. "But you need to understand that the truth may not be easy. Some doors once opened cannot be closed, and not everyone in this house will be pleased that we're looking behind them." Isabella's heart thumped in her chest. Fear and excitement warred within her, yet she knew there was no turning back. She had waited far too long, and the weight of every wasted day pressed heavily against her conscience. Their first move was careful. Emily began cross-referencing old medical records with hospital archives, contacting retired doctors discreetly to verify the accuracy of the information. Isabella, though weakened by her condition, insisted on being present for every step, determined to understand everything herself. Each confirmed fact, each misdiagnosis, each ignored treatment felt like a small victory, a piece of the puzzle that brought her closer to reclaiming her life. Yet with each revelation, the shadow of betrayal grew darker. How many people had looked her in the eye and told her a lie? How many had watched her surrender to fear, while the truth was hidden behind closed doors? As days passed, Isabella began to notice subtle changes in herself. Her strength, once fragile and fleeting, seemed to respond to the renewed hope. Even small moments, walking to the library without gasping for breath, reading a few pages of her favorite novel, became milestones in her personal resurrection. She marveled at Emily's dedication, the way she moved silently through the mansion, a gentle force of persistence and intelligence. Yet Emily was more than just an ally. She was the key to understanding the labyrinth of secrets that surrounded Isabella. Late one evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, Emily uncovered a series of correspondences that had been hidden in a locked drawer. Letters between Jonathan Everhart and a controversial medical researcher who had promised experimental treatments for rare heart conditions. The letters hinted at a procedure that could have extended Isabella's life dramatically, but it had never been authorized. Worse, notes suggested that someone in the family feared the risks, not for her safety, but for the family's public image. Emily felt a chill as she read the words, realizing the depth of the deception. Isabella, reading over Emily's shoulder, felt a surge of emotions, anger, betrayal, and yet a profound sense of clarity. The life she had been told was slipping away so quickly had not been entirely beyond her control. There was a path forward, but it would require courage, strategy, and trust. And for the first time she realized just how alone she had truly been, until Emily had arrived, unassuming and determined to shine a light on the darkness. That night, Isabella sat in the quiet of her room, staring at the papers spread around her like fragments of a stolen life. She clutched one letter tightly in her hand, feeling the weight of the secrets it contained. And in the stillness, she asked herself a question she couldn't yet answer aloud, because the answer might demand more bravery than she had ever summoned before. If someone you trusted had hidden a life-changing secret from you, would you forgive them immediately, or wait until you fully understood the reasons? Best Imunda. The mansion seemed different now. Its gilded halls, once a symbol of comfort and safety, felt suffocating and ominous to Isabella. Every polished surface, every ornate painting seemed to whisper secrets, reminders of the lies that had been kept from her for years. But with Emily at her side, she felt a courage she had never known. Together they would uncover the truth, even if it meant challenging the very people who had raised her. Emily had spent days meticulously piecing together the hidden correspondences, medical records and forgotten journals. Patterns emerged, each revelation painting a troubling picture. There were not just oversights, but deliberate acts of concealment. Certain doctors had been bribed to keep quiet. Family friends had been instructed to report only minor updates to avoid alarming Jonathan Everhart or the household. And worst of all, Isabella discovered that the most critical decision, the one that could have extended her life, had been deliberately blocked. Isabella's heart pounded as she absorbed the magnitude of it. She felt anger, a burning rage that collided with fear. How could the people who claimed to love her act so coldly, so calculatedly? She had been treated like a fragile vase to be protected and controlled, while the truth of her survival lay just beyond her reach. Emily, noticing the tears streaming down Isabella's face, gently wiped them away. "You have to understand," she said softly, "this isn't about you alone. People often hide the truth because they fear the consequences, because they don't know the courage you have to face it. But we will make it right." Together they devised a careful plan. They couldn't act rashly. The Everhart family wielded immense influence, and a direct confrontation could backfire. Emily suggested discreetly gathering further evidence, documenting every hidden decision and withheld treatment, and consulting with an independent medical expert who could validate everything. Isabella, though still weakened by her condition, threw herself into the task with relentless focus. She would no longer be a passive observer in her own life. But tension grew with each passing day. Jonathan Everhart noticed subtle changes in Isabella's demeanor, the spark of determination, the questions she began asking about her past treatments, the insistence on reviewing records that had previously been forbidden. Concern turned to suspicion, and soon he questioned Emily directly, but Emily's calm composure and measured responses deflected his probing inquiries. She was careful not to reveal too much, but Isabella could sense the underlying danger. They were being watched. Every move now had to be calculated, every conversation measured. One night, while reviewing a series of old correspondences by candlelight in the library, Emily stumbled upon a folder marked in Jonathan Everhart's handwriting. Inside were documents that made her blood run cold, notes revealing the motives behind Isabella's withheld treatment. It wasn't just fear of medical risk, it was fear of scandal, of public scrutiny, of the perception that the Everharts had failed to protect their daughter. They had placed reputation above life, wealth above the well-being of a child. Emily's hands shook as she showed Isabella the contents, and Isabella felt a chill run through her veins. The betrayal was deeper than she had imagined. Isabella sank into a chair, feeling both despair and renewed determination. "We can't just let this go," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. All of this, it's stolen time from me. Stolen chances, and I won't accept it." Emily nodded, her expression resolute. "Then we fight," she said. "Not recklessly, not blindly, but with strategy. We gather proof, we seek the right allies, and we take control of your life back." In the stillness of the library, surrounded by evidence of decades of lies, Isabella felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. She knew the coming days would test her physically and emotionally, but for the first time she felt the taste of power over her own destiny, the possibility of reclaiming the life that had been almost stolen from her. And yet, a nagging thought lingered in her mind, a question she couldn't ignore. The mansion that had once felt like a gilded prison now became a battlefield for Isabella's fight for life. Each morning she rose with a quiet determination, her fragile body fueled by a will that grew stronger with every revelation. Emily had become not only her ally but her strategist, helping her navigate the complex maze of family politics, medical secrecy, and social influence. Every step they took was calculated, every move deliberate, because even the smallest misstep could undo months of careful planning. Their first action was to secure independent medical confirmation. Emily arranged discreet consultations with a renowned cardiologist who specialized in rare heart conditions. Isabella, though anxious, felt a spark of hope she had never known. She sat through long examinations and tests, her body exhausted but her spirit resolute. When the doctor finally looked at her, a gleam of excitement in his eyes, Isabella held her breath. "Miss Everhart," he said gently, "your condition is serious, but the prognosis you were given was far too grim. With proper treatment, your chances of living a full life are much higher than anyone told you." Tears sprang to Isabella's eyes, a mix of relief, disbelief, and the bitter anger of having had those precious months stolen from her. She glanced at Emily, who nodded encouragingly. "We'll get through this," Emily whispered. "Step by step, truth by truth." The sense of partnership between them was unbreakable, an unspoken bond forged in the fire of secrecy and betrayal. Next came the challenge of confronting Jonathan Everhart. Isabella knew she could not simply demand the truth. Her father's pride and fear of scandal were formidable obstacles. Emily advised patience, suggesting subtle questions and carefully guided conversations that would force Jonathan to reveal his reasoning. Isabella approached her father in the grand study one evening, her voice steady but her heart pounding. "Father, I need to understand why I was kept in the dark about my treatment," she said. Jonathan, taken aback by her assertiveness, faltered. For the first time in years, Isabella saw a crack in his composed exterior. "You don't understand," he began, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and guilt. "I only wanted to protect you. I thought—" His words trailed off as Isabella pressed gently but firmly. "Protect me from what?" "From living," she demanded, tears welling in her eyes. "I needed the truth, not protection. I needed a chance at life." Jonathan sank into his chair, silence hanging heavily between them. Emily, standing nearby, kept her gaze steady, ensuring Isabella had the space to confront the betrayal fully. While Jonathan grappled with his conscience, Isabella and Emily continued to gather evidence of the concealed treatment, preparing for any potential resistance from the wider family and household staff. They knew the Everharts' reputation and influence could pose obstacles, and they had to be ready for challenges that went beyond simple confrontation. Each discovery added fuel to Isabella's determination, and she began to realize that taking control of her life meant not just reclaiming her health, but exposing the truth that had been buried for decades. The night before her first new treatment, Isabella sat by her bedroom window, staring at the city lights in the distance. She reflected on how far she had come, from despair and resignation to hope and resolve. Emily joined her silently, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Tomorrow is the beginning of the rest of your life," she said softly. Isabella nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had been robbed of time, yes, but she would not allow it to define her. She had discovered the strength to fight, and now, with the truth on her side, she was ready to reclaim her future. And as she closed her eyes that night, she whispered a question to herself, a question she knew many would wonder if they were in her shoes. The day of Isabella's first treatment dawned bright and crisp, the sunlight spilling into the mansion like a promise of renewal. Isabella felt a tremor of nervous excitement as she prepared for the procedure. Gone were the days of silent despair and helplessness. Now she was armed with truth, courage, and an unshakable resolve. Emily, who had been by her side every step of the way, helped her into the car for the journey to the specialized medical center. The bond between them had grown into something profound, a relationship built not only on trust, but on shared determination to fight against the deception that had threatened to end Isabella's life. Prematurely, upon arrival, the doctors immediately noticed the change in Isabella. She was alert, engaged, and remarkably composed for someone who had been told she had only months left to live. The treatment, once hidden from her, was administered with precision, a combination of cutting-edge medicine and therapies tailored to her unique condition. Emily stayed in the room the entire time, offering quiet encouragement and holding Isabella's hand as she endured the physical challenges with courage that surprised even the medical team. Each passing hour of the treatment was a testament to resilience, a symbol that truth and hope could overcome even the most oppressive of lies. Back at the mansion, Jonathan Everhart grappled with a storm of guilt and fear. Seeing his daughter rise above the deceit and begin reclaiming her life struck him with a force stronger than any reprimand or lecture could. He realized that in his obsessive desire to protect Isabella, he had underestimated her strength and autonomy. And as news of Emily's meticulous discovery reached him, he felt an unexpected wave of gratitude toward the young maid, who had uncovered what decades of wealth and authority had hidden. She had not only revealed the truth, but had also restored a daughter's chance at life. Over the next weeks, Isabella's strength grew visibly. The treatments took effect, her energy returning in ways her father had long thought impossible. She walked through the mansion with renewed vigor, her laughter echoing in halls that had once been filled with the heavy weight of silence. Emily watched proudly, knowing that her quiet persistence and careful investigation had changed the trajectory of a young life that was meant to be stolen. The doctors confirmed what Isabella had begun to feel herself. Her condition, once fatal, could now be managed, giving her not only survival, but a chance at a full and meaningful life. The revelation of the hidden treatment sparked difficult but necessary conversations within the Everhart family. Jonathan confronted his own decisions, acknowledging the errors and fears that had guided him. Isabella, with Emily's unwavering support, navigated the emotional terrain with grace, understanding that forgiveness would take time, but justice and truth could not be denied. The household began to shift. Old power dynamics softened, and the quiet acknowledgement of past mistakes created space for healing and renewal. Isabella learned that strength was not measured by wealth, protection, or obedience, but by the courage to face betrayal, claim truth, and fight for life even when it seemed impossible. As the sun set on the Everhart mansion, Isabella and Emily sat together on the veranda overlooking the gardens. The city lights sparkled in the distance, a mirror to the sparkle in Isabella's eyes that had once been dimmed by despair, but now shone with hope and determination. "Thank you," Isabella whispered, her voice steady, "for everything, for showing me that life is worth fighting for, even when it seems stolen." Emily smiled gently. "You did all the fighting," she replied. "I just helped you see the path." And in that moment, Isabella knew the truth of what Emily had shown her. Life could not be measured by the time one was given, but by the courage one summoned to claim it. The days of silence, fear, and deception were over. Her heart, once fragile, now beat with strength, and while the shadow of the past would always remain, it no longer controlled her. She had been given a second chance, and she would live it fully, fearless, grateful, and determined. If you were given a second chance at life after being told it was over, how would you choose to live differently?